Okay, so welcome everybody. Thank you for making some time to listen to our presentation this afternoon. Really excited to be here and talking with all of you about the idea of accelerating business adoption of quantum computing. I suspect there's a higher than average number of physicists relative to the rooms I'm usually talking to, so you might get the joke that I'm about to make, which is that I think that acceleration has two aspects to it, and one is reducing friction. So what are the things that we're doing that get in our own way in terms of accelerating business adoption? And then the second thing that we're going to talk a little bit about today is what does it mean to help get in gear and what does it mean to help you get in gear? So that's a little of what we're going to talk about. We'll probably end with time for questions, so please feel free. I will tell you from much speaking experience that it is much more fun if I or we are not the only voices speaking for the next half an hour. So I am Scott Buchholz. I have the privilege of running Deloitte's quantum computing practice. So as we've been exploring and thinking about what we're doing in terms of quantum computing, what that means for our customers, what kinds of use cases might make sense, and those sorts of things. I'm joined here with my colleagues Alan Andries. So Alan is passionate about quantum computing. I've known Alan for a while now. He started his career as a computer scientist and decided something like 8 years ago that this was the opportunity that he needed to get into. And so he's dug in. He's the deputy of our lead of our program, and he does really great things and brings tons of energy. I'm also joined by the amazing Amy Golem. Amy has arguably been the one who's been pushing quantum computing from behind the scenes within Deloitte for a number of years now. When many of us didn't really know what it was, Amy was there quietly pushing and trying to get us all involved. And so really privileged to get to work with both of them on a daily basis and excited for you to hear from them shortly. All right, maybe a little bit about Deloitte. I'm not always convinced. So 20 years ago, I joined what was the smallest of the big 8, and I was always asked about being an audit firm and so forth. So just for context, Deloitte is the largest professional services firm in the world. We employ 330,000 people worldwide, give or take. We do have a small audit practice. It is increasingly small relative to the size of everything else we do these days. We are global. We work with the global Fortune 5,000, really. And so we have a lot of contacts with a lot of clients. So we get to see all sorts of things. And we are really business consultants or management consultants who are increasingly helping our clients with complex technical problems. In terms of our quantum practice, I would say we are a global community of practitioners. So we have people who are passionate about quantum computing all around the world. We connect on a number of regular bases. We probably have a couple of hundred people who at any point in time are engaged in projects, engaged in exploration, learning, researching, and other things. We are actively engaged in research and working with clients. So for those of you, obviously it's difficult for us to talk about a lot of the work that we're doing because a lot of it gets protected by various confidentiality clauses, but we can talk in general terms about some of the work that we do as we are helping clients think about what quantum means for them and where they should be going from here. And then last but not least, if you're curious, we have a ongoing series of publications primarily targeted at business executives to try to help demystify and help people understand what does quantum mean. And I like to say the three of us get to be the optimistic side of quantum computing. Some of my cybersecurity colleagues who are not here today, they're the Debbie Downers. I'm happy to speak to that, but it's much less fun. We're going to start now by talking a little bit about things getting in our way. And I'll start by saying one of my pet peeves or perhaps one of the biggest things that I find gets in the way when we are collectively trying to work with business executives is what I loosely call Technobabble. It's a technical term. And you probably recognize it as the first slide that has a reference to Schrodinger's cat. Right? There's usually a Schrodinger's cat joke somewhere in the presentation. There's often some explanation about the need to understand superposition and entanglement and all sorts of other things. And I will tell you as a technologist, these things are fascinating. And I will tell you, as business customers, most of our clients and most of your customers and many of the people in the world have no idea what any of that means. And I will actually sort of further demonstrate a little bit of the nonsensical aspect of this insofar as you may recognize this. This is a cell phone, right? It's actually a supercomputer. I don't know, sort of fun fact, I looked this up one time. The phone I hold in my pocket is 10,000 times more powerful than the first Cray supercomputer. All right, so I don't, when I hand you one of these devices, start by explaining NP junctions. Well, we need to understand transistors, so we need to start with NP junctions and how those build into gates and build into circuits and CMOS and everything else. No, we instead start by saying, hey, here are the things that you can use this device for. We are meeting people where they are in terms of understanding. I can share with you, I watched this journey because I have been involved in emerging technologies for something like 20 years at Deloitte. And I watched this most recently on the blockchain journey. We would have our blockchain team walk into our clients. This was 5 or 10 years ago. And they would start by saying, we need you to understand how distributed ledgers reach consensus. So we're going to talk about consensus protocols for the next hour. And when we're done, we can talk about use cases. The funny thing was, what winds up happening is executives who are otherwise incredibly intelligent people feel completely incapable of having a useful opinion at the end of that time because they're lost in the details. So we really need to get out of the details and how everything works, as fascinating as it is to all of us, to be able to meet people where they are. We talk about use case frameworks. They're going to sound similar to everybody else's, but it's really, how do you think about what sorts of machine learning problems are tractable to quantum? What sorts of optimization problems? What might we be able to do with material science and chemistry? Most business leaders understand those problems and can relate them to things they see. It's very difficult for them to relate to superposition. The other alternative I'll just suggest is try to explain what you do to your grandmother. If you lose your grandmother during that explanation, you're probably going to lose most business leaders. I would say your parents, unfortunately, my father's actually an experimental high-energy physicist. So he actually knows what I'm talking about if I talk about any of this stuff. So pick your grandmother. All right. The next thing that tends to get in the way when we are going through all of this journey is hype. I don't know if many of you have noticed, but there seems to be a great deal of hype going on about quantum at the moment. And the challenge with hype is that it sets expectations very high when sometimes objective reality is not quite, there's some gap between those two things. And hype is useful from a marketing perspective. And there are certainly lots of reasons in the market why at the moment hype is a thing and we're all focused on it. And that's important and that's okay. The challenge is if the distance between objective reality and hype gets too great, you wind up going on the wonderful Gartner hype cycle curve. And I don't know if many of you are familiar with it, but the idea is technologies start out and you reach the peak of overinflated expectations, after which there is a tremendous crash, and you go through what's called, I believe, the trough of disillusionment, until you finally get to something useful. And so the challenge is, the more the hype, the longer the trough of disillusionment. And so I think just as an industry, we need to be a little bit careful to make sure that we're not getting too far removed from what can actually be done when we're talking about these things. All right, so last sort of point of friction. Overpromising and underdelivering. So I have been a consultant for many years. I will tell you, 20 years ago, it was beaten into me that the cardinal sin of consulting is overpromising and underdelivering. And then, in fact, you want to do the reverse. You want to underpromise and overdeliver, because that causes customers and end users and others to be delighted with the experience because they got more than they expected. And so think about that when you're thinking about and talking about use cases and other things with potential clients and prospects and business users and others. How do you make sure that you set expectations in such a way that you are confident that you can exceed them? That becomes really important because people come back to those who overdeliver. the conversation tends to be somewhat different if you don't actually meet expectations. So that's really, when I talked about initially, some of the major points of friction that we're currently seeing as we look around the industry in terms of what's actually making stuff go. All right, so from here, I'm going to turn it to my colleague, Alan. Alan.
Thank you, Scott. So I actually want to tell you a little bit of a story about the time I used Technobabble. So I remember a practice conversation with my Uncle George a while back. He's a senior executive in the finance industry over in New York City. Now, before I go into that, let me give you a little background. So, like everyone here, we grew up in a classical computing world. I spent almost 2 decades building software and analytical solutions for life sciences companies. Before that, I worked tirelessly through my teens at building servers, installing networks, and I even put I felt like I was the first one to put a MP3 player in my Jeep. Thought that was pretty cool. And what I want to say is, thanks for taking a chance. And about 8 years ago, I recognized the need to upgrade my skill set. I was in Oracle databases and writing a lot of various code routines, and I felt like I started to need an upgrade. I started diving into particle physics, and I'm getting there, right? Dove into the Qiskit textbook, various other quantum computing books. And I eventually found a set of like-minded people in the company. And we've been evolving that over time, and to the point where we've formalized our practice. And I'm here to tell you about that today. So from an acceleration standpoint, it can't happen unless you're in gear. And so we can help you learn to drive your practice forward and determine how fast and far you want to go. But let me get back to the story. So I called Uncle George very excitedly, and I'm very excited right now, right? I even gave him a week's notice for the conversation. And I told him I had something groundbreaking that I wanted to share with him. And it turns out that so I started the conversation here, in quantum computing. I was doing it all backwards, and I realized that I was not making a good use of his morning, because I started then transitioning into Qubos and VQE, and it was not helpful. But what I realized was that the business topics, the use cases, were what struck near and dear to his heart. And what I found was it was that line that, and I call it the Uncle George line, right? It was trying to have the business conversation. And it was about making things better, faster, cheaper, more efficient for the deals that were in front of him. Now, what I want to further talk about is just our commitment to you and our customers. And when I think about the inputs, when I think about the customer experience that I've had over the last decade, is just so the sorry.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry, I lost my train of thought.
No, you're good. Do you want me to jump in with the customer?
Jump in. I'll step right back in.
Happy to. So when we think through our customer experience, let's kind of round this out with a practical example of what this looks like. And I'll get to that in just a moment, but this is our commitment to getting you in gear. So the takeaway here, if you're a customer, call us. If you're a partner, also call us. We'd love to work with you. And if you're researchers, we would also love to partner with you on the types of problems that we are exploring with our clients. This is what we like to call the exploration engine that leads us to outcomes together in the market to advance this space. So again, rounding this out, let's walk through an example of what this client journey might look like. Typically, when we talk with our clients about quantum computing, we are met with a number of questions that I'm sure everyone here has heard many times. Things like, what is quantum computing? Or when will it be here? Or why should I even care? Well, this kicks off step one, learn and prepare. We work with our clients to help you all understand the impact and opportunity that quantum might have for your organization, as well as perhaps looking at initial milestones that you should track towards so that you better understand when and how to act. This leads us to stage two, scan and strategize, where we develop a suitable long-term and short-term quantum roadmap for your specific business needs. This might look like helping you understand what types of resources you might need and when you might need them, including what types of training you might need to get set up for these resources. In addition, in this stage, we consider your entire technology ecosystem. So if there's other transformational technologies that you are interested in or actively exploring, like AI or 5G, we help you understand where and how quantum plays into that ecosystem. This leads us to stage three, all about use cases. We explore and prioritize the problems that quantum can help you solve. And then that leads us to our pathway to production, where we build. We have a great and growing team of researchers and subject matter experts who are actively partnering with the ecosystem to build out these use cases and proofs of concept. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't also mention that as Deloitte, we are your eyes and ears. We closely monitor the technology and the industry and keep you up to date on advancements that you should be aware of and how they impact your specific quantum journey. So with that, I'm going to pass it back over to Scott for some closing remarks.
Sure. So I think, as you've heard today, we spent some time talking about what it would take to accelerate business adoption of quantum computing. We talked about stopping the friction and stopping getting out of our own way, not doing things that slow down business adoption. We've talked a little bit about how we go about approaching things and our commitments to you as our clients. So our commitment to you as our clients is we will meet you where you are. If you're beginning that journey, we are happy to help you train your executives, sensitize people to what the journey means. We are happy to help you think about your strategy and approach, train your resources. If you're already on the journey, we're happy to help you prioritize use cases or accelerate your path forward. For those of you who are partner organizations, so for those of you who make hardware and software and other things, we're happy to work with all of you because you all are the ones who are providing the capabilities that we use and connect to our clients to help make them successful. For those of you who are researchers, we love to have we have lots of interesting problems. We can always use help figuring out what to do about them. And certainly I found over the years that makes research much more interesting when you have a tangible, tactical problem to deal with. So really excited to be able to have a conversation with you today. All of us are available either at the booth or we're wandering around for the next couple of days. So certainly, if you have a question you don't get answered today, feel free to come find us. None of us are short of opinions, that I can guarantee you. But with that, does anybody have any questions that you would like to ask? Yes?
You referred to the global reach of Deloitte.
Mm-hmm.
That's great.
Yep.
But obviously the quantum moment is smaller than that at the moment. How do you see that evolving over the coming years in terms of how the wider organizations will balance it and reach and especially smaller?
So the question was, just to repeat it, so we're a global organization. Expertise is not equally distributed. And so what is it that we're going to be doing about developing that expertise or making sure that we have enough of it as we go forward? Two answers, at least two. The easiest answer is we actually are engaged in training our colleagues around the globe. We have individuals who have personally dug in Europe, in Asia Pacific, and a number of other geographies. And many of them are PhDs in the various hard sciences who had a personal passion around it, who've been building capability and training their people. At the same time, we are currently engaged in formal and informal training programs to upskill all of the people in the organization, and we are constantly recruiting in from the outside. We're actually pretty good at sharing expertise, so we all work regularly with our European colleagues and the Australians and some of the Japanese and others. And the only thing that winds up happening is when we try to get everybody on the phone across all the time zones, sometimes we lose and have to get up really early in the morning. And as the three of us are not morning people, that's actually a sacrifice. The other, though, answer to the question is that we work with a number of partner organizations because there is no way, I think somebody made a quip yesterday, there's a Bill Joy quote, that the number of intelligent people in your organization will always be exceeded by the number of intelligent people who are not in your organization. And we spend a lot of time working with a whole lot of organizations around the world. And for those of you who have capability, we'd love to work with you and yours as well. So we don't have to do it all, thankfully. That was a great question. Any other thoughts?
Okay, if not, how about we have another round of applause?